Hi, Nithya. How are you?
Hey, I'm great. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Thank you for joining me this week on Bourbon Street. So, if anybody's confused out there, I'm MH3. This is not Don, although Don was here last week. Did you watch Don Mayo's return to the show last week?
Oh, I had to miss it. I just got a new puppy, and she had a bit of a freak out with a fire alarm happening at the same time. But I'm sad I missed it.
Where is the puppy? Show us the puppy. Is the puppy there, or is the puppy out in the hallway
Oh,
locked out?
no, I did not lock her in a hallway. Luckily, I timed her nap at the exact time that the show was airing, so that we did not have adorable interruptions. But maybe on the next time.
Well, I was out till 3 in the morning last night after my Steelers blew their playoff chances against the Vikings. So I was kind of hoping this would be my nap time. So we're going to start with a video from Sick Kids. I'm going to lie down, and you're going to do the rest of the show.
Got it. You got it. Be right back.
Tradition says that there are always two lists. A list for the nice and a list for the naughty. Every year, children all over the world are scribbled down under one side or the other. Or so we believed. Somewhere, we've learned, in a place not quite as north as the North Pole, there is a group of children. Children who aren't just good or bad, but rather brave. Courageous children who face the unimaginable. Theirs are the names etched on the brave list. A secret to most, a marvel to many. You see, at Sick Kids, there is no naughty or nice. There is only the brave.
I don't know about you. I just feel like every time Sick Kids put something out there, they push the creative bar, they push the standards.
Yeah, I completely agree. I like with this one, I like this idea of the Christmas ad or the holiday ad that really, when I lived in the UK about 10-ish, 12 years ago, it was a big thing. All the department stores would come out with their holiday ads. Everybody would have a good cry about it. I love that that tradition is now coming over into North America. And you see that with the way that these are packaged, even with the accent of the narrator, right? You still have that kind of tradition behind it. But I completely agree with you. I love also that philanthropic giving, that a lot of this type of advertising has shifted away from, what we saw 10, 15, even 10 years ago with, poor African kids with flies on their faces, to moving to this more empowering narrative, this bravery narrative. And we're seeing this across the philanthropic sector, which is a nice shift, right? This isn't about pity giving, but this is a rather around like, we are all human. We are just going through different experiences. Let's support each other.
You're too young to remember this, but every ad that you just referred to used to end with 56 Spark Street, Ottawa. I don't know why that address is etched in my brain, but you know what? When we go to our video to tee up our next topic, you can Google 56 Spark Street, Ottawa. So we're going to jump into weekly pulse, and you and I talk a lot about the fact that I like to talk a lot of sports, but sports is meeting politics head on with the 2022 Olympics, which are right around the corner. So let's have a look at the latest announcement around the 2022 Olympics. That'll give you time to Google 56 Spark Street, Ottawa.
We are extremely concerned by the repeated human rights violations by the Chinese government. That is why we are announcing today that we will not be sending any diplomatic representation to the Beijing Olympic or Paralympic Games this winter.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says that decision announced Wednesday should not come as a surprise to China. Same goes, he says, for the diplomatic boycotts already announced by other Canadian allies, in part over allegations of genocide against the Muslim Uyghur minority in China. All this adding another layer of the already complicated relationship between Ottawa and Beijing after China's detention of the two Canadian Michaels. But Canada far from alone in all this, with even more countries expected to announce boycotts soon. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The British Prime Minister confirming Wednesday no government officials will attend the upcoming Winter Olympics over human rights concerns with China.
The government has no hesitation in raising these issues with China, as I did with President Xi the last time I talked to him. There will be a diplomatic boycott of the Winter Olympics in Beijing. No ministers are expected to attend.
A similar announcement down under.
It's not surprising, therefore, that Australian government officials would therefore not be going to China for those games. Australian athletes will, though.
China's foreign ministry slamming the moves as political posturing, saying Australian officials were not even on the invitation list and won't be missed. A day after warning the U.S. will pay the price for leading the way on diplomatic boycotts from a growing number of countries.
Wow. You weren't invited to my party.
I love it.
You weren't even on the list.
I love it. I love it. I do think there was a really salient point, though, in the way that the commentator translated the Foreign Ministry of China's remarks about its political posturing. And I tend to agree. Like, where were these boycotts at the Olympics in Russia? Where were these boycotts in other problematic countries that have been hosting World Cups or Olympics? Like, it's all well and good if governments are trying to stand up for human rights, but that they need to do this equitably and not just do it as a chess match with China. And ultimately, I think it's going to be the athletes and the fans that suffer, because China's not going to be changed. This isn't the way for them to change it. If it's a way to bring awareness, that's, I think, a first step. But I wish there was more authenticity to it.
I think the problem we have is that in 1980 and 84, we had back-to-back Summer Olympic boycotts, right? So, North America and other countries, England, et cetera, boycotting in Russia, and then the Russians did it to 84. I happen to know a Canadian Olympic athlete that was on that 80 team. 70+% of athletes only make it to one Olympics. So for him, that will ever bear a pain in his heart. But you're the perfect person for me to bounce this off of, because you're not into sports. I'm biased by sports. So, do you think they should go as far as to pull out the teams, or do you think that the work and effort that the athletes have put in with their coaches and families deserves? But we are talking about allegations of genocide here.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's an interesting one, and it's a double-edged sword, right? Because if we even think back, to, World War II and the Olympics being hosted in Berlin, or pre-World War II, when we had the Olympics being hosted in Berlin, were there boycotts at that time, or was it rather that a lot of the modern day Olympics are actually based on that Olympics that were hosted in Berlin, right? I think you said this before the show, is that the Olympics aren't about sports, it's about politics. And I would say that if these diplomats are going to be pulling out their athletes, pulling out their presence at these games, it needs not to just be a protest, which is important, don't get me wrong, but the role of government is also to not just protest, but also to enact change. So if they are going to be protesting it, it needs to be coupled with change, because that is not the role of government to protest. The role of government is to take action. It's the role of people to protest and voice that concern. Yeah. So if Trudeau wants to pull out the Canadian Olympic team, then that better be met also, or coupled with, sanctions, or, is it an actual real allegation that they can take to a tribunal court as an investigation? What does that couple it with?
Great point.
Otherwise, it's just political posturing,
yeah.
And it's to the detriment of those athletes where this is their Olympus.
Ironically, when you do think about those 36 games in Berlin, when Hitler was trying to prove the Aryan race was superior, Jesse Owens went over there and obliterated. So think about it. If we had a boycott of those Olympics, we wouldn't have a Jesse Owens.
It's true.
That would be a tragedy. Now we're going to shift gears on to sponsorship on Bourbon Street, and have to make a nice shout out here for Scotiabank as part of their Hockey for All platform. They have a new spot out featuring the first professional trans player. So let's have a quick look at this, and I'd love to get your thoughts.
Hockey was always my safe space. But when I was growing up, there were no trans hockey players. So when I was thinking about coming out, there was this fear of losing the game I love. The way Scotiabank and You Can Play are working to bring people into the game, it's making a real impact. I can't imagine my life without hockey, and I don't think anyone should miss out on that.
I can't imagine seeing a hockey sponsor ad talk about that topic 3 years ago.
Or even last year, or even 2 years ago. But the goosebumps were very real when I watched that video. I think it's very interesting, right? I think that the last couple of years have been really, really telling. The LGBTQ plus movement has been in the spotlight in the right way in the last few years, and there's been a lot of progress. I also think that with the BLM movement, with the focus on racialized individuals in the last year, 2 years rather, I do think it's progressed the movements in different ways. There's just been more of this bring your authentic self into your lives. There's been more of a, hey, let's all sit down for a second and really have a conversation about how we're different and how that's beautiful. And even over dinner last night, we were talking about how there's been more of psychological safe spaces being created around people that are neurodiverse, right? That they might not have felt safe about expressing that they're neurodiverse in the workplace, but now they can not only do that, and their managers will start learning to work with people in different ways. I think there's a lot to still go with trans individuals specifically, especially with this, turf feminism coming to play and trying to set the movement back. But this is beautiful. And I kind of commend hockey, which traditionally is slower to progress, for actually doing something like this.
Well, I'll commend Lisa Ferkel and the folks at Scotiabank, because I think it's them, not hockey. So I want you, as a brand strategist, to think about this next clip we're going to show, where Major League Baseball has locked out their players, but they haven't just locked out their players, which is odd because it's frickin' December, so who's playing baseball? But they've digitally and brand-wise locked them out. So I want your brand perspective on this after you take a look at this clip.
At 12:01, if you were looking at MLB.com, every single player's image scrub from the site. Every player that is listed as a roster, and I used to always have the picture of the player next to it, they're all silhouettes. They are all silhouettes now. If you're watching the MLB Network, you can say the name of the player. You cannot show the likeness of the player. The Shohei Ohtani bobblehead. They've taken his name off of it. It's laughable. It's absolutely laughable, but they can't legally show the players. And now the players are getting a little snarky, too. So a lot of them that are on Twitter are actually taking their picture that they have as their icon, and they're all going to silhouettes. So that's what we're at right now. Silly little children's games where they're throwing poop at each other. But, again, I'm sure the lawyers have looked through this. Without a basic agreement, you cannot benefit by showing somebody's image, and you can't show somebody's highlight. Imagine this. You're going to try to promote a 2022 season, and you can't even mention or show highlights of a player that's on your team. You can't.
Throwing poop at each other. I love that. You got Uncle Michael there in his Lacoste Izod alligator talking poop. Anyway, you're a brand genius. What do you think of this?
So, Mark, I would love to know, before we go into that piece too. So, with this lockout, who was trying to achieve what? I'd love to understand.
Major League Baseball is trying to get a new contract with their players. Salaries are out of control. The New York Yankees spend obscene sums of money trying to win, which they never do. It's the classic case. And not to belabor the point, even though that's not a very good pun about labor issues, but I liked it. Thank you for a little fake smile there. Major League Baseball is one of the worst run organizations from a not worst run, but they've got one of the biggest challenges when it comes to labor and price and salaries. So the big market teams blow out. The small market teams got issues with minor league baseball. So it's good old fashioned management labor negotiations.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting to think about the concept of brand when you are an individual, especially in the limelight, right? And I think it's interesting the way that the contracts have been written right now, and that the players have found these loopholes, because it's also a ludicrous concept to think about. I am an individual. Whether that's a player, whether that's a musician, whether that's an actor, etc., and that your brand, your person, yourself could be owned by something else, and that something else is a corporation, right? It's an entity, and it's a very interesting way to. It's a very interesting way that things have gone about, I think, or how fame has evolved really in over the last century, right? And we see this a lot with musicians. You saw this with the Britney conservatorship, right? It's just the way that how it's modern day ownership of individuals in order to make money.
Free Britney.
Right? She's freed, so now it's protect Britney. She's freed finally, but it's a very interesting way, and I commend the players to finding those loopholes. But I also think that the future of entertainment law, the future of these types of negotiations, need to also protect the individuals and their legacies as well. And it needs to stop being like predatory kind of contracts, because you're seeing a lot of musicians trying to get out of that type of work as well, right?
Look at Taylor Swift and what she's done, and after her re-release of all her work, Universal's now doubling the length of time that they own the copyright. But what to me is really interesting about this is, sport is about your affiliation with your team or your athlete or your love of the game, one of those three principles. Every sport has varying degrees. NBA is very much about the individual. LeBron is bigger than the league, for example. But I just think that, I guess maybe it's contractual, but I just think the way Major League Baseball's handled this, it's more of a detriment to their brand than, say, individual athletes.
Yeah, I think to your earlier question about like if we think about this from a branding perspective, I think the future of this is that athletes, even though it's linked to the affiliation, to the team, to the sport, we need to start thinking about it as a collaboration, right? If we think about Adidas and Beyonce, or Adidas and Ivy Park, it's always my go-to example, but they are separate, very strong brands, and they collaborate together. Yeah. So if we think about the NBA and LeBron, we think, and maybe even we think about Scottie Pippen, we think about the NBA, we think about the athletes and their affiliation.
Nobody thinks about Scottie Pippen. You just outed yourself, okay? Like right there, I'm just calling a timeout. We're going to move on. We're going to have a sponsored controversy from the world of F1, and I'm going to send Nithya some cheat notes. No Scottie Pippen.
Hey, come on.
Pressure is mounting on the Formula One team Mercedes tonight following concerns over a sponsorship deal which was struck with a firm behind one of the installations installed on Grenfell Tower. The Community Secretary Michael Gove, the Mayor and survivors have all urged Lewis Hamilton's team to drop the agreement with Kingspan. Here's Ria Chatterjee.
At the heart of this story are the people who lost their lives and the companies who let them down.
Kingspan are driving into the future.
Today, the Formula One team are in the spotlight. They've signed a deal with Kingspan, a building materials company which made some of the insulation used in the Grenfell cladding. Grenfell United says the news has shattered them, describing Kingspan as rotten to the core. In a letter to the CEO of the Mercedes F1 team, they describe Kingspan as a company not taking responsibility for the murder of 72 people. On behalf of our team, I would sincerely like to apologise to you for the additional hurt that this announcement has caused. Prior to concluding our partnership, we engaged with Kingspan in depth to understand what role their products played in what happened at Grenfell. Kingspan, in a statement, say they played no role in the design of the cladding system on Grenfell Tower, where its K15 product constituted approximately 5% of the insulation.
And Mercedes has announced it has ended its sponsorship deal with Kingspan with immediate effect. Mercedes, AMG, Petronas F1 team and Kingspan today announced that they have mutually agreed to end their partnership. Both parties have concluded that it's not appropriate for the partnership to move forward at the current point in time.
All right, I'm going to rant for a second. This is just stupid. This is sponsorship stupid. This is where we're back to the old sponsorship. We're going to put a logo, we're going to do hosting, etc. You're Kingspan. You know you're embroiled in a controversy. You know that you've got probably lawsuits and explanations to do. They could have very easily done this sponsorship in a strategic and purposeful way. They could have put Grenfell United's logo on there. They could have use the sponsorship to bring awareness to fire safety practices. They could have used this as a way to help, and nothing's ever going to bring back those 72 lives. Whoever was in charge of this was not thinking. So I need a quick response from you because we're going to fly through the next couple of topics.
Got it. So one, that would mean that Kingspan is admitting that they had any involvement, which they're not in the first place. But I actually think this is also a huge issue on Mercedes' F1 team because they didn't do the due diligence necessary before slapping these logos onto a car that they're trying to promote.
You'd have to have your head in the sand. Diligence is giving them too much credit.
But
just be awake. Sorry to cut you off, but just be awake. How hard can it be?
And they're not. That's also a tarnish on Mercedes' or that F1 team's reputation as well for not caring.
And I think to your point, we all know that in life there's reality and there's perception, but then there's also empathy. So even if you weren't at fault, 72 people lost their lives
in a country that Lewis Hamilton is from.
All right, we had a little chat about Olympics a minute ago. Now we're going to have a little funny about Olympics. I don't know if you heard what happened to the curling trials, but the curling sponsors of the Olympic curling trials, sponsored by Easy Toys, which I have never purchased. And apparently NBC did not want to stream a curling Olympic qualifier with Easy Toys on the ice.
Mm-hmm. And Japan as well. They also pulled the broadcast. It's kind of a hilarious one because on one hand you can be like, all right, people need to not be prudes about it. But on the other side, are the Olympics rated G? Because I feel like there's some sort of baseline or criteria here for sponsorship globally. But maybe there isn't. Maybe it's governed by each country.
I don't curl, so I'm looking out to the universe to my curling friends. I need you to tell me why is it the sex toys brand picked your sport to sponsor? What are you hiding from the rest of us? Are you like, is there a whole little thing going on there? Like maybe when people are like yelling, like, you know, the words they yell, I'm not even going to say them out loud on the ice. Maybe there's an entirely different meaning we do not know. I digress.
So what's the next topic? No.
Let's go to the next topic because we're going to get weirder. Have you bought an NFT yet?
I have not bought an NFT yet.
Well, do you think the first NFT you might buy could be a egg from an ovary of artist Narina Arkalian? I know I butchered her name.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. There's definitely some shock value involved with this. I think there's definitely I need to make sure I get some PR and some coverage from this artist. So kind of kudos to her for putting herself out there, literally. I also think it's an interesting way of coupling the virtual world with the real world of I'm going to sell you something in an NFT capacity in a virtual, non-fungible way, but then also give you something physical with in this case an ovary.
So let's just explain what's happening here. She's basically selling a certificate that will live perpetually, but if you buy it and you then want to use one of her ovaries for your baby, you can. That's the story. It's bizarre. You know what? This conversation just got really weird. So let's maybe get Santa to help us out to get us back on course. Will you, Santa?
Hvad sker der, skat? Hvad sker der?
Med 9 minutter fra Frederiksberg til Islands Brygge er du hurtigt videre.
So I don't know what is more impressive me, how hilarious that is, or that the Copenhagen Metro did that. Could you imagine the TTC doing that ad?
No, I really can't. Yeah, it's great though. It's cheeky and it's funny, and I just love the look of disapproval on the mom's face. But also the look of Listen, lady, I'm off duty. I'm hungry. I want to get home, and I'm on a minimum wage.
Well, I also think there's a bit of him going, like, when he realized what he's done, right? Like, he's not like, oh, I came out of character. So, next week we're going to do a bunch more holiday videos. I want to thank you, Nithya, for joining me today. We're going to have a bit of a long close because probably one of the pioneers of the holiday video in Canada was WestJet. They've got a new one. We're going to ask you to sit back and watch it. But thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
Have a great weekend.
Pleasure. You too.
All right. Over to WestJet.
'Twas a night before a Christmas that's long overdue. A Christmas we've all been looking forward to. Last year was hard for us all, coast to coast. So disguised as a film crew, WestJet asked, what did you miss the most?
We're just filming a documentary and we're wondering if you'd like to answer a few questions.
Last Christmas, what did you miss most?
What I missed most last Christmas was getting together with our family.
It was a different Christmas than any other Christmas. I have an autoimmune disease, so we really didn't see anyone.
All my family live in Paris, so it has been like 2 years without Christmas, without them.
We've been together in Toronto for about 2 years, and our family are back in the UK, so we haven't been able to see them in that time. It's been quite lonely without them.
Really, for me, it was terrible because we used to do many things in Christmas time, but this year, nothing, absolutely nothing.
I last saw my mum May 2019, and we were supposed to see them that Christmas, but unfortunately, COVID happened, so it's been 2.5 years.
They then posed the question that would fill Santa with glee. If you had one wish this Christmas, what would it be?
One wish. I would love to see family.
And I wish for everybody happiness only.
To be able to travel, that would be my one wish. Miss those big family gatherings.
For me is to go back to Manitoba with my family and have everyone in the same house.
My family live far away, abroad, and my mom hasn't met my daughter yet. I wish that my family could be reunited this Christmas.
Hi, Annie and Patrick.
Hi.
On behalf of WestJet, Merry Christmas. And here are 4 round-trip tickets to anywhere WestJet flies, so you can be reunited with your family. Okay, go.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas. A little gift for you guys. You can go ahead and open the envelope.
It's not a joke.
It's not a joke. I'm speechless.
I haven't been able to afford, return tickets back.
You guys, that's so nice.
It's been so lonely. It's really difficult to be without your mum. I can't wait to hopefully see her again soon and just give her a great big hug and tell her how much I missed her.
Hi. Well, on behalf of WestJet, Merry Christmas.
Oh my goodness.
So we know it's been a tough year and we can't get you together with your family, but we'd like to warm your spirits with an all-inclusive vacation package to Cancun.
Thank you.
WestJet took to the skies, full of happiness knowing their new guests on board would love where they're going. Then in a twinkling, they were down on the land.
Wow.
Little did they know just what WestJet had planned.
Hola, Natasha and Cameron.
Hi.
Welcome to Mexico.
Thank you so much. We're so excited to be here. My goodness. Oh, so blue and so beautiful. Thank you so much. We're so excited. I can't wait to get in the pool.
We heard your story. I can't believe you haven't seen your family in over 2 years. That's a lot. We didn't think that was right. Everyone should be with their loved ones. But if you think this view is incredible, there's an even better view behind you.
From London, England, they flew all the way across the water because there's no greater bond than a mother and daughter. From the ground far below to the sky up above, we all have places and people we love. We all have that someone that we miss the most. So this holiday season, hold them tight, hold them close. Whether you'll be with your loved ones or just wishing you might, Merry Christmas to all, and to all, a good flight.